Okay, so welcome back to the Bamagate, the channel that is designed to give a better understanding to people of why Jeremy Bamber was framed and why the case creates a real problem for the justice system and things like that. So I talked in the last episode about the evidence. That's something that I can constantly expand upon and give specifics about what actually the background story of why things were destroyed. So that's something I might continue with to give better understanding. So it's always very difficult to know how much you should talk about something. But hopefully, as you go through, you're beginning to understand the implications of what this case or what this situation means for public confidence in the justice system and in policing, and how that would affect the ability for police forces to do their task. You know, policing is very much about confidence. You don't have many police officers for the population, so if the population doesn't broadly police themselves, and they do that when they feel that they're treated fairly, then obviously the system breaks down. So what effectively is happening is really a challenge to the public's belief in what the reality is and what the actual is. And that's what I've said. That's what kind of pulled me into the case. One of the really important things to understand with this case is that it doesn't only stop at the justice system, because obviously Jeremy has gone through a conviction. He's gone through 2 appeals, and I'm going to talk about those later, about the decisions and what was kind of fixed in those appeals. He also went through a 9-year investigation by the Criminal Cases Review Commission, and his case was declined not to be submitted for a 3rd appeal, and how, you know, the forensics and other critical pieces of evidence like bullets and things like that have been destroyed over the years and not protected, and how that's affected the effectiveness of the justice system. That all is within the justice and policing system, which is, as you can probably begin to understand now, is quite a serious problem. But there is another, what I call, roadblock in Jeremy's case. Now, just to go back to define what I mean by a roadblock. Now, Jeremy's case has a number of these, and I'm going to try and cover the major ones. These are things that are not really related to the case, but in my opinion would stop Jeremy ever winning his freedom in the normal way. The simple cost to the image of the justice system and the cost of policing would be too big. You know, so these are going to stop Jeremy, and these are the reasons why Jeremy has been stopped in effectively challenging his conviction through the normal routes, you know, for the last 35 years. So one of the major roadblocks is public interest immunity. Now, what you should do, as I said before, try and educate yourself a little bit so you can understand what I think. The best place to go is just Wikipedia and to read it. And our society is built up. One of the critical things is a justice system. And obviously, as you all know, with a justice system, you get a prosecution, you get a defense, everybody gets to see all the evidence, and you get to fight your case, and you get an independent jury. And if the jury say this, you know, they're your fellow people, they're not taken from the justice system, they're ordinary people from the street, you know. So, you know, the whole system is supposed to be that you are treated fairly. Even if you think you are treated unfairly, you have the opportunity to have an appeal, and the appeal can overthrow the case on whatever reasons and things like that. So the critical thing is fairness. Fairness is what makes it work and what makes people have confidence in the system. So public interest immunity, as you will read in Wikipedia, is effectively a government gagging order on some of the evidence. Now, what that actually means is that you are stopping the normal, fair justice system. So when you issue a public interest immunity certificate, which stops maybe a defendant having access on even evidence that could be used to prove their innocence. What you're effectively saying is there is a higher priority that is greater than justice in these circumstances. So, what I said before in other episodes is I'm going to use other cases to help your understanding. And although I wasn't able to get a copy of the Public Interest Immunity Certificate that's issued on Jeremy Bamber's evidence, there is another one that I was able to get hold of. And what I want to do is explain what happened here so you can understand a little bit about the reasoning behind Jeremy and understand a bit more about the significant problems that the framing of Jeremy Bamber causes to the government, because this is a document that is not signed by the government. This is a copy of the Russian guy that was poisoned with the radioactive poison in London. And this one's signed by, obviously, William Hague, who I think was the Home Secretary at that stage. Okay? So, as I said, this one is pretty critical. You know, if you just have a quick read about what happened with this guy, Alexander Livenko or something his name is, there's two cases. And there's the one in Salisbury, where Russian agents attempted to kill some people with a nerve agent. And then there was this one where they were successful in killing somebody with radioactive poison. Now, this is actually the public interest immunity that was issued initially when investigation started. So in this situation, the government's saying, okay, in normal justice, we wouldn't withhold certain evidence. But clearly this has an international aspect. This potentially risks other implications, you know, I don't think war, but maybe other problems. So what we're going to do is, you know, effectively somebody has been assassinated in our country, and it's been ordered by an overseas government. So what the government initially did is they placed a public interest immunity certificate, which effectively placed it under the Official Secrets Act. It gagged certain critical things around the case. Now, obviously the detail is as you probably know, he was poisoned with a very special type of radiation. So what would have been the outcome is that he would have obviously got sick, which he did. He then would have been taken to hospital, and doctors would have tried to find out what was wrong with him. And some doctor would have said, well, you know, it could be poisoning. And maybe some doctor would have said, well, his hair's falling out. It looks like radiation poisoning. And of course, the doctors would have said, well, this is very serious. What type of radiation has he got? Is there a leak from somewhere? Is it a leak from hospital? Is there, because radiation is, you know, you have the risk of killing other people. So there would have been an investigation to what type of radiation to find out where it had come from. And at that point, people would have said, well, this is a very rare type of radiation that comes from a specific location. And it would have been virtually impossible, even with the gagging order on the case, to keep the story under wraps. You know, it's a little bit like these super injunctions that you get, that you're not even able to report there's an injunction in place. It's an attempt to completely wipe, you know, it away from the public view. In this case, that wouldn't have worked because of the radiation that was used. And that is why the government took the public interest immunity certificate away. That's why you can get a copy of this. But what it effectively does is give you a base understanding of how public interest immunity is used and the circumstances where it's not effective. In other words, if you can find out the truth by other means, what's the point in placing it under a gagging order? Now, of course, the relevance then to Salisbury is obviously, let's go back to the first one with the radiation poisoning. Obviously, it's radiation poisoning. The risk is that somebody else becomes exposed to the radiation, a member of the public. then a member of the public goes to hospital and, let's say, passes away, and then the government is criticised. Why did you try and cover it up? And that has led to the death of a member of the British public. So you can see the implications are it's great if you can hide the story, but it doesn't work if you can't cover up the whole story. So in Salisbury, you see a similar scenario being played out, the difference being that there was a member of the public, it wasn't radiation, it was a nerve gas, it was identifiable to Russia, and as you know if you read about the case, a member of the public did actually find the nerve agent and did actually get exposed to it and actually passed away. And the government didn't even attempt to place that situation under a secret, Official Secrets Act, Public Interest Immunity gagging order. So obviously, Jeremy's evidence is the Public Interest Immunity order is still in place, and effectively, the government can still maintain that because broadly, hopefully, before you watch this video, these sets of videos, but not after, broadly, nobody knew what actually happened inside the farmhouse. Nobody really knew the details of the case. So, obviously, in Jeremy's case, at the original trial, there wasn't the public interest immunity in place. That came a number of years later. Now, my understanding of what happened is obviously you can go to the House of Commons discussions about the failures of the Jeremy Bamber case, and the request from the House of Commons, I think it was actually Bear Grylls' father, you know, the guy that does all those survival things on TV. His dad was an MP. They discussed, or he brought it up in thing and said what was happening down in Essex with that Jeremy Bamber case. We wanted an investigation. Now, as I understand what happened, is the City of London Police investigated, and being a police force, they obviously have a different perspective, and they got to the point where they said, well, okay, you've convicted this guy. There's no doubt about that. You've got him convicted for these murders, and he's serving time. But we're looking at the evidence, and we don't see, you know, he was always going to inherit the farm. His dad was getting him to work on this, and his sister was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. She wasn't able to challenge that. It was always Jeremy. You know, he was receiving an income. He wasn't addicted to drugs or anything like that. So, as I understand, the City of London ran their investigation, and they came to a point where they could see what happened. He'd been convicted, but couldn't really understand, couldn't join the lines between the dots. And as I understand, a negotiation was made with the officers of, tell us what happened, and we'll tell you what happened if you give us immunity from prosecution. Now, of course, they got their immunity. They'd said, this is what happened. And at that point, the government is placed in a very, very difficult position, because obviously the City of London made their report, not the one that they published, but another report, and the government was told, this is the truth of what happened. And the government is then faced with a choice, and a choice very much like in the one that they made in these circumstances. What do? Do you tell the public that Russia's murdering people on British streets, or do you place that under the Official Secrets Act? So what the government basically made the assessment, they said, well, what would be the consequences of us telling the truth? It would not be a good day for British justice. It would not be a good day for Essex Police. It would not be a good day for the confidence in the police force. And effectively, Jeremy, who knows he's innocent, has never been able to work out exactly what happened. He's never been able to find out the truth. So, we can be pretty sure, if he hasn't found it out by now and nobody else has, we're going to make the decision to place it all under a gagging order. We're going to remove the ability. And that's when the decision was made. The problem being with that is it's great if there's no alternative way that anybody can ever get to the truth. What I want you to do is imagine a situation where you've got, let's say, your son who's playing around in the garden with his cricket bat and cricket ball, and you hear a window break, and you walk out there and you see your son stood next to the broken window with his cricket bat in his hand and his pads on his legs and the cricket ball inside the window and the window broken. What's the son going to say? He's going to say, I have no idea how this window broke. I mean, clearly, it's not a defensible lie. You're going to look at them and just say, that's a stupid thing to say. I know and you know exactly what's happened here. You play in the garden all the time with your cricket bat. It's not the first time. There would be no point in lying. So, lying only works when you can adequately hide the narrative. Now, if the son is playing in the garden on his own and his dad's out and he breaks a window, it might be possible for him to say, okay, I'm going to take off all my cricket gear, put it away somewhere to make it look like I wasn't playing with it, remove the cricket ball and go out on my bike and be nowhere near the house or nowhere near the broken window. He might be able to create the narrative that he had nothing to do with it. And as long as his dad doesn't figure out that he was playing cricket in the back garden, potentially his dad will never ever know the truth and he can get away with blame. The real problem, obviously, with a public interest immunity certificate is it leads a paper trail from the justice system to the government. And obviously, if you read a public interest immunity, it's quite a specific document. It states out very, very clearly that, this is a serious step to be taking. It effectively wipes all of the normal processes that make a society work in terms of equal justice. Everybody gets access to all of the evidence. You get a defence. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to a lawyer. And all of that process that makes society fair and why people engage in society. It takes it away. But in Jeremy's case, it effectively pulls the government into the cover-up. So as I said, I'm going to try and explain how there are roadblocks in Jeremy's case that stop him ever winning his freedom through the normal appeals process. And the public interest immunity is one of those roadblocks. Show that Jeremy is innocent. The questions then arise, so what did happen? The original police documentation shows clearly that somebody is moving around inside the farmhouse. Obviously, a paranoid, schizophrenic woman who's just shot her kids does not worry about being seen. And obviously, it's then clear it's not a mistake. And then you have a document with the Home Secretary's signature on it saying, don't tell people. We put this evidence outside of the reach of Jeremy. That then means there's a paper trail to the government in terms of the cover-up. So it creates a very interesting dimension to the case. I mean, all of you probably know about the case of Stephen Avery. So if you try and, as I said, I'm going to use a number of cases as I go through and explain the evidence with things that you already know. What you see in Stephen Avery's case, I mean, quite a spectacular story, but you don't have a clear paper trail to the government saying, do this and cover this up. The public interest immunity in Jeremy's case is effectively, that's what it does. And it creates a bit of dilemma. If you can stop anybody ever finding out what happened, maybe you can get away with it. But if anybody ever finds out, if anybody ever gets assisted in terms of discovering what happened, then that process breaks down. Obviously, I would, like I tried to find out who had signed Jeremy's document. It's not too difficult process. All you have to do is find out when it's dated, when the evidence became placed into public interest immunity, and find out who the Home Secretary was at that time. It's an interesting process. That's something maybe you should do, or something for you guys to do online or something like that. So public interest immunity, that sums it up. It's one of the key roadblocks of why Jeremy will not be allowed to win his freedom through the normal ways. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I'll move to the next episode.